Making the warm and cool Y tree is very easy. The first thing you want to do is decide which side of your paper is the back and put your name and block on the back of the paper. So let's say if I was in block 5, I could just put B5. You're going to flip your paper over, and to start making a Y tree, the easiest thing to do is to find the middle of your paper, go a little bit north of the middle, and draw a line straight down to the bottom. From the top of the line, go to each corner. So you can hover over it first with your hand if you would like. Go from the top to the corner, to the corner. So we're using lines to make basic shapes. Shape is the area enclosed by an outline. Right now we have 3 shapes and 3 lines. To turn this Y into something that looks more like a tree, we're going to branch off of the branches we have. So I can make a branch off this way, a branch off that way. Where you put the branches is up to you, but they have to start on either the trunk or an existing branch, and they have to go to either a branch that already exists or the edge of your paper. So for example, I can go from my branch to the edge of my paper, or I can go from branch to branch and also to the edge of my paper. You can start making your lines thicker. Where the branch is attached to the trunk, they are going to be thicker. You also want your trunk probably to be a little bit thicker. So I'm just coloring with my black crayon here, nice and solidly, to make my trunk thicker. You can gradually keep making that bigger and bigger if you would like as you start adding more branches. So I can add more branches. You can make them curve or you can keep them straight. That is up to you. Okay. Just make sure you're following the requirement of having them start on a branch for your trunk and either end on another branch or end on the edge of your paper. So that way we create many enclosed shapes using lines. Okay? Because the edge of your paper is also helping to create a border to our shapes. Make some branches further down. You want to have a good number of shapes because the shapes are where we're going to be painting our warm and our cool colors. So make sure you have a lot of shapes to work with. This is kind of like an abstract tree, where if you look at it, you can tell it's a tree, but it's a very, very simplified tree. We're not putting leaves on our branches. We're not going to draw a scene around our tree, because we're reviewing simple things like line, shape, and warm and cool colors. Make sure you don't have branches that just end in the middle of nowhere. So an example of something I don't want to see is if I try to make a branch just like that and it's just hanging out, you don't want to do that because that's not creating an enclosed shape, it's just creating an awkward line. So we're going to keep going until we hit another branch or the edge of our paper. Be mindful of what you're doing. If you're very cautious and you're concerned about making it oops, you can always draw lightly with the crayon and then fix it afterwards. You don't really need to draw with a pencil first for this kind of activity. Okay. Let's see how many spaces I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22 is a pretty good number. I'm going to go up to 25. So if I put a line here, that's 23. I'll make this a little bit thicker where it goes into the tree trunk. 24. And then I feel like this space is very large, so I kind of want to break that up. after you've drawn your tree, you're going to get a tray of tempera paint. Tempera paint you probably remember from previous art classes. If you are new to this Orchards art class or you've never used these before, you don't ever want to touch the tempera paint with your fingertips. So if it gets kind of gross on the top, you can take a sponge or a damp paper towel and just wash it off. You don't ever want to pour water in these. So you want to take a moistened paintbrush and gently touch the bristles to the paint cake or paint puck to activate it, okay? So we're gonna make 1/2 warm colors and 1/2 cool colors. In the middle, if you're like, well, I'm not sure if this shape is on the left or the right, you can kind of make that choice as you're painting. So the warm colors are red, orange, and yellow. So I'm gonna paint each shape either a solid warm color, so I can fill this entire shape in orange, or a gradient. So to make a gradient, I'm gonna use orange because that's what I started with. So I start painting with orange and I'm gonna partially fill in a shape. I'll rinse my brush off really, really well. If your water gets gross, go ahead, dump it out and get a new cup of water. If you have muddy water, it's gonna make muddy colors. I'm gonna activate my yellow. I'm gonna paint starting on the edge here and then blending it into the orange. So it's gonna be a transition, okay? So warm colors and cool colors. You wanna try your best to not have shapes that are the same color side by side, which is where having a transition of colors can come in really handy. I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse this. So the other half of your painting is gonna be cool colors, which are blue, green, and purple. Keep that in mind, okay? So 1/2 should be warm and 1/2 should be cool. After I painted all of my warm shapes, or most of my warm shapes, I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do about these two spaces, but I'm gonna problem solve as I'm working. So as I'm starting my cool areas, another thing I wanna remind you of, or teach you for the first time, is that you can mix and blend these colors right on your paper. So the cool colors are blue, green, and violet. And the violet that's in these paint trays is kind of a warm looking violet. It looks more red violet than actual purple, which is fine. You can use it as it is. But if you wanted to make your own purple, you could, for example, paint with red first. And I know I'm painting on the cool side, so this might be confusing. So if I paint with red first, and the wax is helping me to stay in the lines, it's pushing the paint away. I'm gonna rinse my brush out really well. I'm gonna take blue. You can use either the turquoise or the blue that's in your paint tray. I'm gonna paint right over the red that's on the cool side. And it's going to turn purple. So if I use the turquoise, it makes kind of like a bruise looking or like a midnight purple. Okay, just make sure you fully mix it. Sometimes the paper can start to flake and peel up when you're mixing on the paper, and that's okay, just be careful. I'll rinse out my brush. So doing the same process, I'm gonna paint the cool side. So the left and the right, so I'm not saying that the left has to be cool and the right has to be warm. Which one you put on which side is up to you. Or even if you're thinking, you know, maybe you wanna make the top warm and the bottom cool, that's a creative choice you can make as well. As long as you're showing me that you understand how to properly use the paint by being careful and staying in the lines and taking care of your materials. And you're showing me that you can remember the warm and cool colors. So you're giving me visual evidence that you know the difference between warm and cool, okay? So this is a project. I want you to show craftsmanship, take your time, be careful, be creative. Again, try not to have two shapes that are the same color side by side. It adds more visual interest and variety if you have many different colors spread throughout, still adhering to the warm and cool requirement. So make a transition there. Another thing you can do is if I want to make a transition from green to yellow green, which is a tertiary color, I can take my yellow and start to blend it in with my green. And you got to make sure you really blend it so it doesn't look like it's yellow. It should look like yellow green, which is kind of like a Mountain Dew type color. Okay, I'll take my purple. For visual consistency, I might want to make a transition or gradient of colors on both big shapes, but you don't have to necessarily. It's okay if it's not symmetrical. If something is symmetrical, it means it's the same on both sides. So another thing I can do is I can blend and mix as I'm painting. So I'm getting different kinds of purples in there. Always rinse your brush out when you're switching colors, especially when you're doing a gradient. That way you don't contaminate the paint for the next student. I do like that purple. You can also take a wet brush and you can blend the pigment together better. Just be careful you don't use too much water because you might start to dissolve your paper. You can get some more blue greens as well. So if I use green, take my turquoise, make it more of a blue-green. Okay, so if you forget the warm and the cool colors, just ask for help. I can help you to remember. Stay in your lines. It's okay if you get paint on the table, just don't get paint all over the back of your artwork if you can help it. Now for these middle areas, I'm thinking that they're almost in the exact center of my paper. They do kind of lean more towards the cool side. So for visual balance, I could absolutely say, you know, these are going to be cool because then it's more balanced. You could also say, because it's in the middle, you could go from warm to cool to make a continuous spectrum or a gradient where you transition from a warm to a cool color. So for example, I can take my red and I can transition it to purple. Or you could draw another branch there if you wanted to visually break it up more. And then I'm going to go into this blue here. I'm just using the end of my paintbrush too. You shouldn't be mashing the paintbrush into the paint. Make this red a little bit smoother into the magenta, or the purple rather, sorry, not magenta. Make this red a little bit more intense. Okay, so if you have a creative solution for what to do when you have shapes in the middle, you can do that. Just make sure that you are meeting the project requirements. I'm going to say this shape is honestly more on the cool side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make that green. I'm going to make it a yellow green. So I'm going to rinse out my brush and take a little bit of yellow and make it a yellow green. Okay, and that's it. So when you're done, you're going to put this on the drying rack and make sure you click Mark is done or turn in on Google Classroom.